distinguish them in the process. Sometimes the admission won't be as selective, which means that they may have very deliberate admission criteria. If a student has a 3.0 GPA and a 24 ACT, so it will be very explicit sometimes for some of those large, non-selective public institutions. Very straightforward in their admission process. The same could be true, again, for the medium and small public institutions. So it's very important to recognize, and costs probably will be much lower as well. We encourage families to also look at retention and graduation rates for those institutions. And the philosophy. The philosophy of those institutions might indicate that they give wide-ranging opportunities to students, meaning that a student who may not have done so well in high school certainly may be given an opportunity as a first-year student, and at the end of the first year, if the student doesn't do so well, then that's really the student's problem. Certainly there are resources available, but the institution says, hey, we're going to give you the opportunity. It's up to you to decide whether or not you're willing to put in the work to do well at our particular school. Medium and small private institutions, the cost starts to go up, and certainly the selection process goes up as well. Again, you'll find a wider variety of academic opportunity, social opportunity, but again, that criteria starts to change as well. Large private institutions and public institutions that are selective look very similar. Cost, criteria in terms of the admissions process, and variety of academic opportunities and social opportunities as well. In terms of thinking of preparing yourself, certainly the first step is curriculum, looking at what you're taking and what's available to you. We encourage students to do a self-inventory, which again, as a junior, hopefully you've started to think about the things you enjoy the most, both in the classroom and socially. What are the classes where, no matter who's teaching it, what hour it's offered, you're thriving in the classroom? Those are the classes where you might start to think, what are the majors that are associated with those academic areas? You also want to think about your academic interests. So that might be a summer camp this summer, or an academic opportunity on a college campus. Certainly that's not required, and often because of the challenge your students are facing in the classroom in terms of that rigor of curriculum, I encourage them to take the summer off academically. Have fun. If it's working a job or doing community service or volunteer work, certainly engaging in something that allows them to redeploy their skills. So certainly applying it perhaps in a physical manner versus feeling like, again, they're kind of confined and staying in a classroom over the summer. Certainly there are some students where they thrive and enjoy that the most. So again, this is no one, kind of a one solution for all students. But certainly taking the summers off to rejuvenate, to really recycle, take stock is important for students. So again, those opportunities outside of the classroom to apply some of the skills they've learned certainly are equally as important as trying to challenge themselves in the classroom as well. Also performing academically, so setting realistic goals in those classes, whether it's thinking, gosh, the classes that I most enjoy, I'm going to set some goals for myself to receive A's in those classes. Great goal to have. If they're not able to achieve that or accomplish that goal, certainly it's still a goal to set for oneself. So we encourage students to think in the classes where no matter who's teaching it, what hour it's offered, that's my best course, to aim for the best grade possible in that class. If you fall short, at least you still had that goal, and you can take stock to determine why it didn't happen. Additionally, thinking of the rigor of curriculum, as I've mentioned, challenging yourself in the areas where you do your best work is something that colleges and universities certainly are looking for. And certainly at Groves, there are a wide variety of academic opportunities spread throughout the curriculum, spread throughout the 4 years of high school. And we would encourage students to challenge themselves each year, so not waiting until the junior or the senior year to take advantage of those opportunities. Selective institutions will be looking at that, and I'll talk a little bit more about it as I get to curriculum. So we'll look at those classes. We'll look at how they performed in those specific courses and what was the trend throughout the 4 years of high school. So not simply just that one class, but how did it factor in throughout the entire curriculum over the 4 years of high school. We also want you to get involved in the things you're passionate about. And certainly that doesn't always translate into something that's associated with an academic area of interest. So certainly a student might be interested in something that is offered as an extracurricular activity at the high school, but this also could pertain to community service or an organization in your community. Those are all important things. And in the context of an evaluation process, we look at that, how your student spends their time academically and when they're outside of the classroom. And that gives us the balance. Certainly this is practice for what will happen in college, and certainly our goal is for them to already have that practice. Because again, as a school like Michigan with 1,400 clubs and organizations, lots to do outside of the classroom. But the goal is not for your student to enroll, the goal is for your student to graduate. So as they balance these things in high school, certainly believe they've modeled the behavior that will lead to the success at the college level as well. So again, getting involved in clubs, organizations, community service are all important. It's also important to recognize not everyone can be the leader, so followership is also important as well. So for a student who hasn't been a club president, that doesn't mean you don't have great chances of being admitted to college. Certainly organizations need people to be involved and to be dedicated. So we do look for really your persistence, your ability to stay involved in clubs and organizations over time. So that also is important to us as well. Standardized tests, I think usually the guidance counselors call junior year the year of the standardized test. Is that fair to say? Yeah. So often your student feels like they just keep taking tests. For us, it's one of many factors in the evaluative process. It helps to verify what we see throughout the application, the grades, the courses selected, the rigor of the curriculum selected in terms of AP and honors courses. So certainly it is one component, but it is not the only component used in the evaluative process. I will clarify that there are some curriculums that look at test scores more closely than others. Our science curriculum, so really our College of Engineering, and many colleges of engineering do look at math and science preparation more closely, do look at standardized test scores more closely, specifically because of the curriculum match that they're looking for that freshman year in terms of the courses and the mix of classes that students typically will take. So recognizing a student coming in taking calculus, physics, and chemistry all in the same semester, certainly wanting to make certain that the student has the right combination of preparation from high school to feel comfortable taking those classes the freshman year of college. As you're thinking about what your next move might be, certainly research, so going online, I encourage you to visit the websites for the specific colleges and universities you might be interested in. The reason for that, if you're visiting what might be any number of what are considered third-party organizations, so College Week Live or Zinch or College Board and ACT are probably third parties that know the most about colleges and universities and actually receive updates from us yearly. They also have the most information about us because you officially report your test scores through testing agencies to colleges and universities. But as you start to work with those other organizations, so third parties who say, hey, give me your information and I'll make sure I get it to colleges and universities, certainly you're now getting it through a filter. So I encourage you to take the filter out and go back to the college or university you're interested in and get the answer directly from the college or university. How many students have heard of College Confidential? Only you. Okay, well you're in the know. College Confidential, actually I'm happy that you all are familiar with it. It is a website that certainly students and their parents go on to get answers to questions about colleges and universities. Guess what? Colleges and universities don't answer those questions on College Confidential. It's other students talking to students and providing their own ideas about the answers to those questions. Sometimes they can be very helpful, but they're also very frightening. So I encourage you not to visit. Don't read those answers because they're alarming and they're often from a particular perspective. So by the time a student finishes reading them, they're very, kind of wound up because again, it's from a particular perspective. Certainly there have been some good answers there, but I don't know if students can figure out which ones because certainly the people are speaking very much in the same kind of language, so you don't know who's more knowledgeable and who's not. The web is very good at equalizing everyone and making everyone look shiny and new and very well informed. So I encourage you to visit the website of the college and university. We all have chats, we all have blogs, we all have people who answer our phones, so we're happy to answer your questions directly, so there's no need to filter it to a third party. Additionally, I know there's probably some misconception. If you contact us and ask a question, I notate it, I make sure that I put it in your application. I don't notate it, I don't put it in your application. I answer your question. So we encourage you to ask the question directly, rather than thinking I need to contact them anonymously because they're going to make note that I asked this question and I don't know if it's a good question. Any question is a good question. So we encourage you, ask us directly. Visiting campus is really important. I encourage you to do it now when in some ways the pressure's off. You're not making a decision, you're simply looking around. Often visiting a college campus can be done early on just to become familiar with the college campus, to get a sense of it. Parents, I encourage you to allow your student to set up the visit. If your student isn't that eager, Certainly that can tell you something about their interest in that particular college or university, but also see how your student navigates that process, specifically if it's a little bit further from home, if you're driving to that location. Are they eager, excited, or engaged? Are they enthused about it? Are they worked up, just trying to get there? Does it seem difficult? Are they frustrated? Those are things that early on, if you're noticing in the process, gives you some idea about where your student is in terms of this process of letting go. Especially if you know you've handled everything, you schedule everything, that getting them there, getting them to the front door is something that you are prepared to do. Certainly, making sure that they enroll is great, but at that point, making sure they make it to class every day will be your student's responsibility. So this is what I consider low investment way of making sure that your student takes some responsibility and you get to see how interested they are in that particular college or university. Talking to teachers or family members, and certainly talking to guidance counselors is very helpful. The guidance counselors here are very well prepared. I've worked with them for over close to 15 years now, reviewing applications for the Birmingham area. And so I can tell you that they're very well informed. We visit every year before we begin the process. I talk to them routinely throughout the year, and that's very normal, not just for the University of Michigan, but for colleges and universities in general. We know your students and the curriculum that's available to them through their guidance counselors. We ask questions. And so it's important to recognize that the guidance counselors tell us a lot about the high school. They keep us informed. We ask them, are there any changes we need to notate or know more about? So talking to your guidance counselors and listening to their advice, very helpful, because they often will call, or I'll call them if I have a question as well. Parent discussion, setting goals, being clear about your expectations. Certainly I always hear the Thanksgiving deadline for many students as it relates to submitting college applications. I think now with early action it seems to be Halloween. You can't go out for Halloween if you don't have your applications completed for many students, or whatever it might be, whether it's maybe homecoming or something. Several of my colleagues, their children are in that process and they are withholding checks for things until applications are done. Whatever works for you, for your particular students, I think you all have to negotiate that process. But certainly if your student is engaged and enthusiastic, certainly that campus visit might be a piece of this, may get them started and motivated to get those applications completed. Certainly there are other students who are motivated way too early. So as juniors, you don't have to be motivated to complete the application now. Your application typically will not become available until the summer before your senior year. The University of Michigan releases our essays in May, but that's the only thing that's really available. So again, as you're thinking about the process, you have the summer to work on essays. In August, our application goes live. Some schools, the application may go live in late June or early July, but certainly, as you're thinking about the selection process, some of the elements you might need won't be available. What I can tell you is making sure that you submit all of your documents by the deadlines, very, very important. So a component of that, as we start to talk about test scores, is just releasing your test scores to colleges and universities. One thing off your list, one less thing to worry about as you start to think about completing those applications next year. Talking about family finances is always something that we encourage families to set realistic expectations. Certainly having that conversation is key. What we're finding is that families often don't have that conversation, and what ends up happening is they have it in my office or not. Sometimes I'll have the family who will say, can you tell my student they can't come? Or can you tell my student